Welcome back to Earth Station Trek, a show where we trek from the early days on NBC to the future on Paramount Plus and everywhere in between. I'm Charles Kelso, and it's my privilege to introduce the Earth Station Trek crew. Keith Johnson.
Monsters from the id.
Alan Seiler.
Oh, the pain.
And Veronica Dashel.
Go Power Rangers!
I
love it.
And as if you might have guessed, we're not talking about Star Trek tonight. We are
What?
Right, we're voyaging beyond Trek and talking about some of the other sci-fi shows that have inspired us over the years, particularly when we were young. Other shows that we've loved all of our lives. And I love you guys' little intros. And Veronica, I love that you brought one to the table that I would never have thought of. Like, I could have named sci-fi shows until I die and would not have gotten to Power Rangers.
Which is hilarious because almost all of the fight scenes for the first 3 seasons were literally stolen from the Japanese version.
Yeah. But I was a few years older than I still am. Just a few years older than you.
Yeah.
And
that has not changed.
Yeah. And so Power Rangers missed me. What is it about Power Rangers that you love?
I think it was probably the fact that they were teenagers and fighting to save the world type of thing. Because I was also into Animorphs, which was teenagers that turned into animals and saved the world from alien invasions. So I think that's what drew me to it, because that's what a lot of what I read was teenagers saving the day.
Saving the day.
Right. Well, Alan, was Power Rangers top of your list?
Oh, absolutely. You know it was.
I have seen a combined maybe 15 minutes of Power Rangers in my life.
Oh, really?
Maybe 15 minutes combined. Yeah.
So that's like catching it when you flip channels, and then you may flip channels another time 4 weeks later.
Right.
Right. Yeah. They never appealed to me. And I don't know if because Charles, you said you're a few years older than her. I'm a few years older than you. So,
and I'm a few years older than you. We got it all covered.
Yeah. So I don't know if it's a generational thing or just a preference thing. They just never did anything for me. Because I've seen a lot of them. I've seen some of the original Japanese. For me, it just never worked. But I know they were so phenomenally popular. Have you ever had something where you wish you liked something because everybody else did, but you don't? No. I've always felt left out of Power Rangers because everybody loved them and everybody's doing that, weird fighting stuff. And I just go, okay.
Right. I love that people of different ages come to this with different things, different touch points.
Yeah, absolutely.
I had my friend Benjamin on Facebook said, I think it was Bobby Neutron. Jimmy Neutron.
Jimmy Neutron.
And
that was a little after my time.
Yeah. It's, and I love it. Whereas I'm. What shows sprung to you guys' mind?
Okay, guys, just real quick. Power Rangers and Bobby Neutron. We got to take this thing back to the 20th century, like to the early 20th century. So hang on to your hats. Let's do some black and white up in here.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
What do you got, Keith?
One of my favorites, and I hate to do a space theme because it ties so much into Star Trek, but it was a really, really good cartoon that I watched as a kid. It was a cartoon called Space Angel.
Okay.
And
I've never heard of that.
Yeah, we probably should have been able to do pictures. Space Angel it's a series that lasted for 2 years, 1962 to 1964, and it's about a trio of people. A guy called Space Angel. It's kind of cool. Space Angel has an eye patch because, back in the day, everybody who had an eye patch was either evil or super cool. So he was super cool. There was a lady as part of the crew, and there was a guy who was the engineer. This is another one reference that nobody will get, but maybe Charles and Alan. They had this really weird look where you'd see their animated faces, but they didn't move a lot, but the lips kind of moved. There was another. Clutch Cargo, right.
Yep.
And honestly, there's not a lot of what you would call really good animation. A whole bunch of this is there'll be an animation of the ship. You'll see the ship, and the ship looks like it's being dragged across the screen instead of a lot of animation. But what's so good about it is for the early 60s, this is a science fiction show that really kind of took itself seriously. It wasn't goofy Monster of the Week shows. It was fairly dramatic. The spaceship was an old classic. It was the old Needle spaceship. that looks like the old rocket ships and had the big fins on the back of it.
Yeah.
It's a very serious and fairly mature show for the time, especially if you look at science fiction from the 40s and the 50s where it was kind of goofy and bug-eyed monster. This is one of those cartoons I put in the same class as movies like Forbidden Planet and stuff, where they're trying to be a little more serious. It's not as good as that, but it's very good. I absolutely recommend giving it a look. I think it's even on Amazon Prime now. It's called Space Angel.
Interesting.
But you gotta lose all the love for the modern animation and stuff because it is not super sophisticated animation.
Yeah,
as long as it's telling a good story, though, I think that's the important thing for me.
Yes.
You had sent me some links to it, and I haven't had a chance to watch it all yet. But yeah, it's got that sort of Clutch Cargo style where it's not animated really; it's more still frame. But that was Saturday morning television in 1962.
Right.
Right.
What about you, Alan?
Well, let me get a few comments first because some of these pertain to our first topic, which came from Veronica. So we've got.
I'm super blind even with my contacts and/or glasses. So I saw what looked like Power Rangers because there was what was maybe a P and maybe an R, and that's why I leaned forward.
Oh, okay.
So I was like, what are they saying?
So our first comment is, well, I'm going to read them to you, so you don't even have to have eyesight. Sorry, that was weird. Okay, our first comment is, yes, Animorphs.
Hey.
Yay!
Matt Sweatman says, we had Japanese shows such as Battle of the Planets and Star Blazers as a kid, sort of our Power Rangers. I remember Battle of the Planets very well. I don't know Star Blazers.
Star Blazers. Star Blazers original was Space Battleship Yamato in Japan.
Oh, I know that name.
Yeah, it was redone. And dude, you just recalled yet another part of my youth because when I was in junior high and high school, Star Blazers and Battle of the Planets came on back to back on local television.
Wow.
And before that was Flintstones and Speed Racer. And Battle of the Planets and Star Blazers, man, those are great.
Yeah.
Okay,
all right.
Pausing for just a second to respond to the person that said, yay, Animorphs.
Okay.
Animorphs is probably my deep dive into science fiction because my family was mostly a sci-fi family aside from Star Wars, which is kind of fantasy.
They were a fantasy family.
We were a fantasy family. But Animorphs is like the reason I started going online, the reason I learned to code HTML from scratch at 11 and was building websites, and is the reason I was online. Most of my online names are through Animorphs. So
seriously,
yeah,
I didn't know that.
I didn't know there was a character in Animorphs called Veronica.
There was not, but I had a giant crush on Marco.
I don't know who that is.
So Veronica, if you like, that's interesting. I didn't know that. Animorphs. Is there any Star Trek analog to that at all?
I don't think so, because the bad guy, there was like, they had crazy aliens. So, I mean, there was like the Yerks, which are the symbiotes, but the bad guys, and they basically take over the body and make you do things. And then there was Andalites, which were like dear human people with also eye stalks and great big giant eyes, and they were blue, and they ate by running around and their hooves getting up the grass because they didn't have any mouths and they only communicated telepathically. And then there's the which are like these 7-foot tall creatures with like blades everywhere, but you later find out they're peaceful creatures and they use those blades to jump from tree to tree in their natural homeworld. So yeah.
Animorphs would have missed all of us because it was a YA book series.
Yes. I haven't even. I have not read this one.
Yeah, because you were an adult.
Yeah. Okay. Comments. Mystic Force Power Rangers theme song was the best.
Okay.
Oh boy, we could do a whole show on that. Theme songs.
I missed Power Rangers. I was too old for them, and my son was more into Yu-Gi-Oh.
Boo.
Okay.
I didn't like Yu-Gi-Oh.
Boo?
Boo's
I
our poor
didn't like
kid.
Yu-Gi-Oh.
I don't know if all these Facebook users are different people or not.
Yep.
Oh, I love Jimmy Neutron, says one Facebook user.
Yep.
Possibly a different Facebook user says, Animorphs was one of the series that got me into reading for fun instead of just school.
That's awesome. Cool. Yeah.
Yes.
My buddy Kim Swanson in Tennessee says, Lex, when sci-fi brings in the devil, it's just diabolical dialogue.
Wait. Are you talking about that sci-fi series Lex, Lexx, that used to come on
Yep.
Friday nights?
Yep.
Oh man, dude, I tried 2 episodes of that and could never watch that. Somebody tell me what's good about that show.
Scantily clad ladies when I
Yeah,
was
basically.
16.
See? That's what I remember. And if you remember, Lex was on back in the great days when Stargate, I think, was on Showtime or something like that.
Right.
And then, gosh, what else was on? Warehouse 13 was coming back then. And that was when sci-fi was good.
I loved Warehouse 13.
Yes.
Loved that show.
There was a lot of good stuff on, but I didn't think.
was.
Yeah, but I didn't think Lex was one of them. But wow, interesting.
Okay. We clearly have at least 2 different Facebook users, or one person is arguing with himself because this one says, hard disagree. Power Rangers Zeo had the best theme tune. Oh, we're about to go with the theme tune wars.
Okay, Zeo is where I kind of fell off.
It's worth noting, too, that if you've not authorized StreamYard to display your name, then it won't. It'll just show you as Facebook user. So if you want to be credited for your comments, you can also add your name. Or if you want to be anonymous, that's perfectly fine, too.
Yep. Another Facebook user says, currently on Australian free-to-air TV is Buck Rogers in the 25th Century and The Bionic Woman.
Yes.
Yay.
Nice.
Yeah. In America, at least where we are, Comet TV shows the $6 Million Man and the Bionic Woman at something like 2 or 3 in the morning, Sunday mornings. I watch them because I have them set to record, so I've been watching those. Those are great shows, especially I just rewatched the $6 Million Man pilot a couple of months ago. I watched the first season. That thing was a whole lot better than I remembered. It's because it's very serious. You know, the original book was called Cyborg, and I really hate the name $6 Million Man, but the first 2 or 3 episodes are really good. That's good television still.
What would he be worth now with inflation?
Oh, you know what? On that, what was the show with Katie Sackhoff where it was the kind of continuation?
Bionic Woman.
They put her price in the billions, which would make a lot more sense given what you'd have to do. Yeah, honestly, it'd be more like 6.
That was the era of TV shows that was on in reruns when I was a kid. I was born in 1980. So through the 80s, all of those shows were still airing. So I would always catch those. And Knight Rider was big. That was a new show when I was a kid.
Yes.
Oh,
yeah. Those are great.
All right. Yes.
I was gonna say one thing real quick for the $6 Million Man love. If you love that, you remember the famous $6 Million Man versus the $7 Million Man.
1 million better.
Right. Yes. It was awesome.
Oh,
that's true, Veronica.
All right. Randolph Kroom says, what? 8 with their hooves? What a concept. I agree. That is really, really creative. Matt says, I remember seeing Lex DVDs. I've never seen them. It seemed somewhat naughty.
It is.
Yes.
It is.
I think they
I've
wanted
only
people...
watched like 1 episode, but Gina Torres. Is that, am I saying her name right? No.
No, you're saying her name right, but she's not in that show.
But that's not the right person.
Why did I think she was in that?
You're thinking of Cleopatra 2525.
Oh,
which was
that's
great.
what I'm thinking of. Okay.
Which was great. That was a great show. A great camp show. I love Cleopatra 2525.
Randolph also says, yes, Warehouse 13. Elaine says, I was just going to ask if Wonder Woman and the Incredible Hulk would fit here. I love those as a kid. I think so. Absolutely.
Yeah,
sure.
Like superheroes falls into sci-fi more than fantasy.
Yeah. And I was like teen, I think, when those shows were happening. I watched them. I loved them.
Yeah, and it's
but
really... Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, really, any show that was your gateway into sci-fi and television. I mean, back then you didn't really get to be choosy. What was on TV? What was on TV? You know,
absolutely.
We're
Whatever your
spoiled now
watched.
that you can just watch whatever you want whenever you want. But back then, what was on TV was what you had to choose from.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
it
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Alan. Sorry.
Okay. Mentioning Wonder Woman and Incredible Hulk, that reminds me of 2 things that I used to watch when I was a kid that I didn't think of when we were prepping the show. So this is like total top of the head thing. But it was Saturday morning, live action mixed with animation. The Mighty Isis and Shazam.
Yes. Absolutely.
Oh, man,
Absolutely.
I love those shows so much.
Yeah,
Holy
Mighty
smokes.
Isis, and you're right. Those are great shows. I was up every morning, Saturday, watching those. Alan.
The guy who used to play Billy on Shazam ended
Mhm.
up, I think that was the guy, ended up being a florist, and he owned a company, and he like serviced the like Beverly Hills, like the rich part of California. And I've heard this story from Sharon Osbourne that they would use this company, and the guy himself would come to their house to make deliveries, and Ozzy would answer the door, and then he'd turn around and say, "Sharon, Shazam is here."
That's
That's
hilarious.
awesome.
Oh God.
Gosh, and for those of you who didn't see that Shazam show, let's just say back in the day, Winnebagos and campers were really big in TV because they drove around the country and I guess a Winnebago. And you remember the chant he used to do, Alan?
Sort of.
Yeah, it was weird because, as you said, Billy would go into the camper and he would want to consult with the men from whom the name Shazam came: Solomon, Hercules, Atlas, Zeus, Achilles, and Mercury. And he would go in there and he would go, "O elders, fleet and strong and wise, appear before my seeking eyes." And then, and then they
I
did
can't
this really.
believe you remember that.
That's how much I watched that show, dude. I haven't seen that show probably in 20 years. I still remember that.
Yep.
And then they would show the animation and they would give him, and I think also, for those of you too young to remember, there was this real weird period in the 70s where, after years of glorious violence like Tom and Jerry and Popeye, the country started doing theme cartoons. And Shazam became one of those theme cartoons. And then for about, gosh, almost 10 years, you guys remember everything after that had to have a theme like cooperation was good, violence was bad, smoking was bad. Shazam was one of those. So every show, they were basically, Billy had to learn a lesson.
Right.
And we're not really, young people aren't listening. I miss the days where it was just kind of mindless violence. It didn't have a lesson. And that culminated in the famous G.I. Joe. Now you know.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Back to comments real quick. Kim says, would The Prisoner count?
Yes.
Yes. What a phenomenal show.
I love The Prisoner.
God, it's so trippy.
Yes.
It's such a mind bend.
Yeah.
It is.
God, I love it.
And it's taking that secret agent format and doing something really weird and cool with it.
Yeah.
Did y'all watch The Prisoner as young kids? Could you get something out of it if you were young?
I was a kid.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
I was probably 12, 13 when I saw The Prisoner.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Same here. I watched it. It was a weird show. And that ball that would encase people scared the heck out of me as a kid.
That was really effective.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Matt says, up until the late 90s or so, I'd watch any sci-fi on TV, good or bad. Yep. We're there.
Same here. Yep.
And there was so little on at that time. I mean, there's like a glut of sci-fi, fantasy, superhero television now that was not the case when I was growing up.
Same here.
I was growing up at a really cool time because the Sci-Fi Channel. I mean, we started getting that, I guess, in '93. So I was probably 12. And from there on out, I was just addicted to that channel. I mean, you could watch any old sci-fi show. One Saturday, I spent the entire Saturday watching a Logan's Run the series marathon for 13 hours. And it was a joke in my house. Like, where's Chuck? Oh, he's in there watching sci-fi. And I would just watch all of his old Land of the Giants, Land of the Lost, all that stuff.
I love
Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea.
Yes. Yes.
So I'm thinking maybe this is why I missed a lot of this when I was a kid, because we never had cable at my house. We didn't have video games. Yeah. I mean, so I watched GPTV and PBS, and that was it. And I was allowed to watch the channel 36 and channel 69 on Saturday mornings, and I was allowed to watch Lois and Clark and Murder, She Wrote with my parents on Sundays.
Nice.
Until I was about 14, 15, and then I would also get afternoon cartoons when Spider-Man and Iron Man were first coming out and doing their cartoons in the early mid 90s.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, by the late 90s, when you were a teenager, a lot of that stuff was going to cable channels because you had all these specialty channels like the Sci-Fi Channel that were airing this stuff. It wasn't just in the afternoon anymore like it used to be in the 80s and earlier.
Yeah. When I was growing up, you only got that stuff on UHF with the loop antenna. which
Right.
nobody remembers.
Right.
And local stations. When I growing up, there was a local station called Channel 11 in Dallas Fort Worth, and on Sundays, fortunately, right after church, they used to show science fiction movies. So I used to watch all that kind of stuff there, Veronica, because there was no cable. And that's where I watched stuff like Day of the Triffids and The Creature from the Black Lagoon and all those other old classics. So my early sci-fi goes back to extreme black and white,
Yes.
early sci-fi.
It was blacker and whiter.
Yes.
Well, a lot of that stuff.
Black and white.
My uncle had this huge VHS collection. I had an uncle who was single, and his VHS collection was stored in my grandmother's basement. And we used to joke that it was like a video store down there. And I had the run of the place. And it was everything from Betamax to VCDs to Laserdiscs to tapes to every format. Because he had the money to do it. So he had the money to, back then when that stuff cost money. And I mean, I watched the Planet of the Apes movies off Betamax tapes. And
so good.
Yeah.
Man.
So good.
All right, we've got a stack of comments. So
Okay.
let me get them. All right, Mork and Mindy.
Yes.
All right.
I haven't seen it enough yet.
Nanu, yes.
The problem with Lex was they changed the lead actress so many times. Michelle Ryan was the lead in Bionic Woman reboot. Oh, I remember Michelle Ryan.
Michelle Ryan and Katie. Yeah, and Katie Sackhoff was the first experiment that failed, and she was kind of half nuts, right? Remember that?
Yeah. Yep.
That was a great show that never took off, unfortunately.
My buddy Michael Phillips says that for him it was the Avengers, and I want to give a plug. Michael Phillips has written a book about the Avengers. It chronicles the entire series, every episode, including the lost ones, and I will not remember the name. I'm so sorry, but search Michael Phillips and Avengers and you'll find it. And you should buy a copy because it's fantastic.
We're talking about the British spy Avengers, right?
Yeah.
Emma Peel and Patrick McGowan or McNee? I always get them mixed up. McNee,
McGowan was in The Prisoner.
Right.
The Avengers was cool. That's cool. That was cool spy stuff.
Absolutely.
It was cool, like Mission Impossible cool, which we don't do. We don't have a lot of cool nowadays. So I'm glad you brought up the Avengers. We have action-packed, but cool and slick.
Right.
They were cool and slick.
Right.
All right. Love the cameo of Linda Carter in Wonder Woman 1984.
Yes.
100% agreed.
The only good thing about that movie.
Okay. not that I'm disagreeing, but off topic. Matt Sweatman says, I am so in tune with Alan and Keith. I watched all those shows. Heck yeah, man. That
awesome.
That was a great childhood.
Yeah.
Facebook user says, this is a great forum, but I need to go. Thank you, host. See you, Facebook user.
You're welcome.
I hope that's only one of our many Facebook users that is leaving. And anyway, Michael says, the first two big shows I remember watching when I was a kid were $6 Million Man and Bionic Woman.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Nice. Randolph Krim says, I remember watching The Prisoner in the 60s as a kid when we only had about 4 channels.
Yes, sir. Ditto.
Sequest.
I never watched that very much.
It was next gen underwater.
Yeah. I never, for some reason, I never watched it.
The great thing about Sequest is it got weirder every year. I guess they didn't get the ratings, and so it starts off just pretty much standard sci-fi in the future, taking yourself seriously. Then pretty soon you've got genetically engineered people and a guy with fins, and then pretty soon they're in space, and then they're 10 years in the future, and it's just like that. The show just got wilder as it went along.
That's not unusual.
And it featured, at least for a while, featured one of my absolute favorite actresses in the entire world, Stephanie Beacham.
Awesome.
That's right. And she was in a lot of stuff back in the day, too.
Yeah, she really was.
Yeah.
I adore her so much.
Chuck, I'm sorry, Chuck, real quick, Chuck, you mentioned all that change. Roy Scheider, who was no slouch of an actor. After a while, he's like, I can't hang with the show anymore.
No, he had no interest in sci-fi, that kind of. He was like, this is all baloney. He did the show. I guess they paid him enough to do the show, but he didn't stick around with it for very long.
Right.
No, he did the first 2 years, and then Michael Ironside took over in the last year.
Yeah.
Who was awesome.
Yes.
Just as an actor.
Almost caught up. Matt Sweatman says, the truly rare sci-fi shows that my parents would watch. what? My mom loved Twilight Zone, so that was an extra special for us. Now, Chuck, I know that Twilight Zone is one of yours.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite shows of all time. That was
Yeah.
my uncle had the entire VHS collection, but also it was on TV all the time. And if
Yes,
you
it
catch
was.
the right holiday, you could just sit and watch it until your parents made you go to bed because it was
And
just
still
Yes.
can.
24 hours.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I think Rod Serling and Gene Roddenberry style sci-fi sort of ruined me for other things because I mean, every story was not just about the plot. Every story is about
Yeah.
something, some nature of the world or human existence or human nature.
Yeah.
You know, and that stuff was huge for me growing up.
Right.
And
And
did
I
you know
love-
that?
Go
Oh,
ahead.
go ahead, Alan.
I love that whole anthology setting. I love
Yes.
it's basically reading a collection of short stories. You know, I
Yeah.
love novels, but there's a very specific craft to short story writing. And
Right.
that's exactly what these shows were like.
I
And I
agree.
love them. Go ahead.
I agree because Twilight Zone and Outer Limits had real authors like Robert Bloch, as well as people
Mhm.
extensively trained in TV writing. And I think one
Yeah.
thing we've talked about before, so many of those people back then they cross pollinated from everything like Outer Limits to Twilight Zone, of course, to Star Trek. And that's why even to this day, I've been saying sometimes I have difficulty with some of the newer track writing, only because maybe I'm so steeped in that Twilight Zone writing and
Right.
because they were so good. But yeah, I used to watch that all the time. And it's an off topic because it's kind of not really, it's really just going from science fiction. But then I graduated from Twilight Zone to Night Gallery. And there are some episodes there that still creep me out to this day. That was another good one. That's not science fiction. That's really horror.
Right. Yeah. I never
Supernatural.
really got into Night Gallery because it
Mm.
wasn't the Twilight Zone. And I was,
Right.
you know, to me, it was just like, this is not as good and it's in color. So I need to go back and watch Night Galleries
So-
because I've heard good things about them.
It's
But
good.
But did you also watch Outer Limits as much as
Yes.
Twilight Zone? I
Not
thought
as
so.
much, but
Yeah.
I did also watch it.
Those are
Outer
great
Limits is
shows.
good. Yeah.
Yeah, but they
There's-
weren't doing Outer Limits marathons for New Year's
No.
and things like that. Like
Right,
Twilight
That's
Zone
true.
was everywhere.
And it's so cool because if you watch even just those 2 or 3 shows, just Twilight Zone, Outer Limits, and Night Gallery, you'll see like every track actor who was also, of course, back in the day was in every Western, every medical
Yeah.
drama, every cop show. Yeah,
Yeah.
Outer Limits was a great one. There's one about, I'll just say about these killer giant ants with big teeth that still creep me out. And I think you guys know the one I'm talking about.
Is that the
Still
Zarby
creeps me out.
Misfits?
Hmm?
Is that the Zarby Misfits?
Yes, good
The
God.
Outer Limits? They're like giant ants with human faces.
Yes.
That's a
Oh,
great
yeah, that
monster
one.
to this
Oh,
day.
Oh man,
Yeah,
they
that's
creep me
awesome.
out. A friend of
That's
mine
good.
texted me a message one time as a joke, and I opened a message when I was lying in bed, and it was a picture of one of those things, and I literally screamed.
That's a good friend.
That's right. Exactly. All right. 3 more to go, and then I'm going to do my pick for my big
Okay.
show growing up. Okay. Since you asked me that question 20 minutes ago. Michael Phillips says, "Oh, Alan, you knew just what to do." Yes, I did. The book is called Quite Fantastic: The Avengers for Modern Viewers. So search that title or that
I will.
author name on Amazon, and you'll find that book.
I'll check
I
that out.
Awesome.
highly recommend it. Matt says, Sequest was a good example of TNG's success led to a boom of sci-fi TV sci-fi.
Mhm.
This is one I missed. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
you can
enjoyed
still
it.
stream it. It's on Peacock, Sequest.
Oh, is it really? I hadn't noticed that.
and
Oh, sweet.
and he's right. There was this huge boom of sci-fi
Yes,
in the
there
90s.
was.
Some were good,
Yes.
some were Space Rangers, but it was really entertaining to watch. I mean, there was always time tracks and sliders,
Yeah.
and I loved those shows.
Oh, yeah, man.
Yeah.
And the last one for now. Twilight Zone was like a mini noir epic every week.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So since Chuck asked me 25 or so minutes ago what my show was growing up, and I think most people know this. I've mentioned it on this show before. And I said, if I had every bit of money in the world, I would build an exact in every detail replica of the ship from this show, and I would live in it. And it's Lost in Space.
Mhm.
And I have
Awesome.
my Lost in Space lunchbox.
Awesome.
Oh,
Look at
wow.
Oh,
Awesome.
Look at
That
that.
is so cool.
And I have quite a collection of Lost in Space robots.
I brought mine too.
Yes. That's so awesome. Oh my gosh. I loved that show so much. Okay, so here's a story from my childhood. I was not a reader. And I know that's weird since I ended up working for a publisher and in bookstores and now a library, and I write books. I did not grow up a reader. And my mother, so I watched, when I was really little, I watched Lost in Space on network in first run, but my most memorable experience with it is in syndication, afternoons after school, when I still love the show. And I think part of it was that I was almost exactly the same age as Billy Mooney. So Will Robinson was a kid my age who was having these space adventures that I wish I was having. And I connected with that kid so much. Like, that's what I wanted to be. You know, when I grew up, I wanted to be a space guy. But I would refuse to read. I just hated it.
Really?
And my mother would hold Lost in Space, which came on at 4:00 in the afternoons, ransom. And she would not let the TV be turned on until I read at least a page or a couple of pages of a book.
Wow.
That's awesome.
And I would pout like this, but I would watch that clock and it would get closer and closer to 4:00. And finally I would start reading like this just so I could watch Lost in Space.
That's great.
And for those of you too young to remember, if Alan had tried to sneak and watch the TV, his mom would know it, because later on it would be hot. And that's a whole that's a whole other thing.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a phenomenon that does not exist anymore.
It exists anymore. Al, let me ask you a question. Lost in Space was by the late great Irwin Allen, who did Time Tunnel, Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, Towering Inferno, all these other things. And one thing that happened when he was doing all those TV shows is they all had pretty strong first and maybe second seasons. And like what Chuck was saying about some other shows, about a third season, every other episode was an alien wearing that aluminum foil spacesuit or Loch Ness Monster or something. So, and Lost in Space is claim to fame is the horrible episode where Dr. Smith was turned into like a living plant by that man wearing a giant carrot suit.
Yeah.
Did you still watch the third season? And would you watch it again now?
Oh, yes. So let me tell you the arc that this show goes on. And first of all, that was the final episode. And the guy who wrote it went to Jonathan Harris and he said, I am so sorry about this script. I literally could not think of anything else. I've written every story for this show that I could possibly write. That's all I've got left.
Dude.
So the first season, which was in black and white, was much more serious.
Phenomenal.
It was really well written. It was well thought out. The characters were great. The second season, Dr. Smith, the robot, and Will took over the show, and it got silly.
Yes.
The third season, it hits a balance between those two. There's a lot of silliness, and there's a lot of really silly episodes with those three. But mixed in there are some really, really good television. So season 3 has a lot of my absolute favorite Lost in Space episodes. So I absolutely watched the third season. It sort of rebounded from the gutter that it fell into in season 2.
And to piggyback on that real quick, because we could talk an hour about that, but like you said, the first season was interesting because there's just no way around it. Dr. Smith was murderous in the story. He literally was trying to kill that entire crew. And even when I remember when there's a whole episode, doesn't kind of make sense, when John falls off the ship and John leaves the ship and he crashes on a planet. Dr. Smith, who has control of the robot, has the robot come out with a helmet from a spacesuit and crushes it. And then he says to Major West, imagine if that were your head. And if you remember when they first crashed on the planet, Dr. Smith programmed the robot to every night find a member of the crew that was alone and kill them. That was how that show started off. And the only reason he was about to kill Will Robinson, and I don't know if you remember this, Alan, but earlier today, the robot had huge lightning that would come out of his claws. The only reason he didn't murder Will Robinson is this weird thing where Will Robinson's voice sounded like Dr. Smith's. Supposedly, the timbre, that was what happened. But the first season was incredibly good and serious. They even had Michael Rennie from The Day the Earth Stood Still as being called the Keeper on
the
there.
Keeper. That was my favorite.
Yes.
It was a two-parter, and it had a ton of monsters on it. And when I'm like 6 years old, I was all about the monsters.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. So let's see. Matt Sweatman says, Lost in Space, another show I watched with Mom. Elaine says, so do you like what they did with the Lost in Space remake on Netflix? Next question.
I do.
I couldn't get into it. I tried. I tried so hard.
I like it so much. Go ahead, Sean.
No, go ahead.
Real quick, I like it so much, but I got to say something sacrilegious. I enjoyed the movie with John Hurt, and Matthew LeBlanc,
and Mimi Rogers.
Lacey Chabert. I am Bill Mooney. I actually
Gary
like that
Oldman.
movie. Gary Oldman, yeah. I actually enjoyed the movie.
Heather Graham.
Yeah. It was a flop, and people say it sucks, but I thought it was pretty good, all things considered.
Yep. It had its moments. Elaine says, oh, wait, we did that. Sorry. Hang on. What? Veronica?
What? I was just laughing at you.
Oh, okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Facebook user says, we used to want to watch Lost in Space on Sunday mornings, but my mom always made us go to church instead. So we almost never got to see it. Oh, that's so sad.
Oh. Sorry.
Jesus wept. Sorry, that was terrible.
Alan, I was kind of the opposite of you. Like I was a reader. Not initially. Like I didn't really start reading until I was 8. Because I fought my mom over it. But once I started reading, I was reading everything. And that's where most of my sci-fi was in reading, with Animorphs and Diadem and in the Ender's Game series. And there was a Christopher Pike YA book, and I always forget the name of it, that has a hourglass and there's a girl on it. But almost all of my sci-fi was through reading, and that's all I did then. So I missed a lot of the TV shows that were going on in the 90s.
My little sister read a lot of Christopher Pike books, and every time she was reading one, I would tell her that's a character from Star Trek, and she never cared.
Wait, is this real? There were YA Christopher Pike books?
There was an author named Christopher Pike, and he actually chose his pseudonym from the character of Star Trek. Christopher Pike was the name of this. He would write books. It wasn't about Christopher Pike.
Okay, gotcha. This is something else I've never heard of.
So another show that I really liked, and the reason I'm bringing this up is because it sort of has a connection to the Animorphs thing.
Okay.
Space 1999.
Oh, I was going to ask about that. What's her name? Mara?
Maya.
Maya, yeah.
And she came in season 2, and there was this big shift between season 1 and season 2 because Fred Freiberger, they hired him on because they were like, can you make our show more Star Trek-y?
Yeah, you did such a good job on the 3rd season of Trek.
Right, exactly. Right. So I guess he came cheap. I don't know. He was like bargain. And so he was the one who came up with Maya because he wanted to have a Spock character on this moon that flies around, you know.
I didn't know this.
And she, her special ability was that she could, she was a metamorph, so she could transform into any animal form that she chose. And so she was anamorphing all the time.
Yeah.
So was it she could just turn into whatever she knew? Okay. So with the Animorphs, the other interesting thing is they actually had to touch the animal to get their essence. So
every time they change, or just the first time?
Just the first time.
Okay.
So them turning into lions and bears and gorillas was a hilarious initial story.
And I don't know that she could turn into anything that she knew, because she knew a lot of Earth animals.
Yeah, she's always a panther and stuff like that. Exactly. That was a big one.
and a hawk and shit. And I'm like, how does she know this stuff?
The best Space 1999 episode is Dragon's Domain.
Oh, you got me, Charles.
Domain. Look up.
Dude,
Dragon's
you got me.
Domain.
I was going to say that. Yes,
that is a wild episode.
Yes,
it holds up really well.
It does. It does.
There's a lot of writers and directors too that most people know from Doctor Who that wrote on that show. So if you dig Doctor Who and Blake Seven and all those sort of related shows, a lot of that talent was behind the scenes on Space 1999 as well.
Wow.
Terrence
Right.
Dix wrote for it. A number of the directors worked on that show too. So, you know, Whovians should enjoy it.
Yeah, and if you get into those things, you start getting to those 6 degrees of separation because Space 1999 starred Martin Landau, who some people really wanted to play Spock in Star Trek. And then his wife, Barbara Bain, was on the show, and they were both also part of the IM Force on Mission Impossible. And so there's all this connective tissue. I had an Eagle model when I was a kid, the spaceships that they used. I love that thing.
Me too. I had those not polar lights. It was a company that preceded them, but I had like these whole model dioramas of like whole episodes of Lost in Space, and I had all the Eagles from Space 1999. Oh my God, I love them.
Yeah, they were great.
Love them.
They were great.
All right, Chuck and Veronica, y'all need to jump in with some more of your shows.
Yeah, I mean, the Irwin Allen shows were always playing on Sci-Fi Channel when I was a kid. And I brought my Land of the Giants trash can that I have in my bedroom.
Oh,
I love
that
shows.
same
I love them
design,
even when they went corny and crazy.
Yeah,
because they were just colorful and fun. Go ahead.
That same design was on the lunchbox. Like, you know, back at the time the show was on the air, lunchbox.
Right.
I had that lunchbox.
Awesome.
Oh, I love it so much.
Yeah, you mentioned Land of the Giants, Charles. And I think one reason I loved all those Irwin Allen shows, Land of the Giants, Lost in Space, Voyage of the Sea, is even though they became camp later, in their first seasons and stuff, they really were trying to be serious. For example, if you remember Land of the Giants, they were on a passenger ship that did basically suborbital flights. They would go up into low Earth orbit, hit hypersonic velocity, and come back down. Something we're still trying to get right to this day. But you know, that was kind of realistic because, you know, they had stewardesses on there. It was basically a passenger ship. And then they went into some weird warp. They also had for the 60s. I mean, you remember how they always had like the grappling hook that was a giant safety pin and all that kind of stuff? I got to say the effects they did for making that world look giant were pretty darn good for the 60s.
I agree.
They did a good job.
Yeah.
I agree.
And the giant hands that would come
out. Right.
Yeah. Man, I love that show.
Did you guys watch Battlestar Galactica?
Of course.
Yeah.
I even watched Galactica 89. Yeah.
Yeah. The Galactica 1980. I also watched that.
1980. Yeah. That's 1980.
Not as good, but it was still fun.
Right.
And then every morning the Sci-Fi Channel would play Land of the Lost before they would play it at 8:00, which I had to be at school, so I had to set the VCR every single day to watch Land of the Lost, and I loved that show. And I became convinced that the little ape men, the Pakuni, that their language was a real language. And I had a notebook, and I was like writing down the language. My brother used to make fun of me. He was like, "They're just making ape sounds. That's not a language." And I'm like, "It's real. It's a real language." So when I grew up and found out they really hired a linguist who came up with like 500 words, and I was like, I knew it. I was right. It was a real language all along.
You were vindicated.
Wow.
Yes. Yeah, I watched it. It was I never loved it, watched it.
Well, it was one of those Saturday morning kids shows that was just way smarter than it needed to be. I mean,
Absolutely.
David Gerald ran that show, and he had people like Larry Niven and Theodore Sturgeon and Dorothy Montana. They're running real sci-fi stories for that show.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it still had the tone and the flavor of a kid's show. It was made for kids to really enjoy, but to really think about too.
Yeah, you still had Dopey the dinosaur, and she would feed him berries, and meanwhile they're like learning about, you know, temporal rifts and things like that, you know, universes.
Right. You had, what was the guy's name? Was it Enoch, who was the advanced? He was the flea stack from the future.
No, he was the flea stack from the past.
That's right.
He thought
that's
that he traveled into the past, and then he found out he traveled into his own future, and his people had descended into savagery. And that was just, I mean, that's great, like heady sci-fi stuff for a Saturday morning kid show.
Yes.
And the funny thing was I forget I forget his name, but the actor on the show was the young man with the curly black hair. And he was in the first season or so when he left the show. He played,
the dad or the son?
The son. It was the son, not the dad. It was the son.
Wesley Ure was
Wesley Ure.
Yeah. He played well, no, not this. Okay. There's the guy who was old, he's like in his 20s, had curly black hair that was on Land of the Lost.
That's probably the dad then.
He played he was a heartthrob at the time because he played Mike Brady on a soap opera called The Days of Our Lives. And it was it was a kind of a big thing when he was cast on the show because they were trying to bring in
That's got to be Wesley Yore.
Yeah, that's got
Wesley Yore.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
I know
Wesley
he was
Yore.
also
He
on
was-
the soap
he was-
at the time.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
was very much a Brady type of guy.
Yeah,
He
that
had
was
that
it.
Brady look about him.
Yes. Yeah, I used to watch the show and that corny song. You remember? Amid the greatest earthquake ever
great
known.
song. I like that song.
All right, you want to talk about great theme songs? HR Puffin stuff.
Oh yeah.
Where they don't ever have to actually have an episode that sets up the whole world because the song tells you every single week how
Yes.
this whole thing unfolds and how it all got started.
Exactly.
God, and that brings up all those weird ass puppety kind of like people in big weird
Yes.
costume shows that Sid and Marty Krofft used to do. Lidsville and the Bugaloos.
Sigmund and the Sea Monster.
Yep.
I loved those shows
Yes.
so much. Those are my childhood right there.
I did too. I have a friend who's about 10 years younger than me recently. She didn't watch TV growing up, period. So she missed stuff that a lot of people would have caught. And recently we were having this conversation, Alan, and I was telling her about HR Puff and stuff, and I was telling her that Sid and Marty Krofft were basically promoting, marijuana use and stuff, even though they denied it. And she's like, "What are you talking about?" And it was one of those where I just assumed she knew. So I went online and I took a screenshot of HR Puff and stuff, Lidsville, Sigmund and the Sea Monster, the Bugaloos, and the Banana Splits.
Oh God!
And 5 minutes later, she's like, "Are you serious?"
Yeah.
She goes, "This was real?" Yes. She goes, "You watched this?" Yes.
Every Saturday without fail. Oh my God, I was obsessed with
Yeah.
those shows. All right, let me get a
Yeah.
bunch of comments because we got a stack of them again.
Awesome.
Let me see. Oh, so I just want to say real quick, there was a big debate in my school about Star Trek versus Lost in Space, and I was like the only Lost in Space guy. Everybody else was Star Trek. Funny how that turned out.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we used to watch Lost in Space on Sunday mornings, but okay, I got that one. I watched sci-fi before I got into Star Trek. My interest in Star Trek inspired me to read the classic sci-fi novels such as Foundation and Dune.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
Oh,
Yes.
okay.
Elaine says, I didn't watch a lot of sci-fi TV shows, but there were a couple of movies that were my favorites and I would watch all the time. Explorers and Flight of the Navigator.
Yes.
I've seen neither movie.
I
haven't
had
either.
both on tape when I was a kid, and those are great movies.
Yeah.
I hear good things.
You know, my earliest memories are like I was tiny and I was watching these old like 50s and early 60s sci-fi movies that, like you talk about the B movies, these might have been
Yes.
C.
They're great.
And they are. I
Yes.
love them. And I still love them to this day. But at the time, they just filled me with so much like imagination and stuff. They just fired my synapses,
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the first time I ever got told that as far as we were aware, there was no other planet or galaxy in the universe that was capable of life. And I was like, that can't be true.
Oh, I think there
Aliens
is.
obviously exist. I mean,
Yeah.
that's stupid. Okay.
Yeah.
Michael Phillips, whose name's again not displaying on StreamYard for some weird reason. I love Space 1999. I have all the Blu-rays and still watch it periodically. I just got through watching a bunch of them with the Italian soundtracks.
Wow.
Wow.
Oh, okay. Nice.
They just did a new, like, really nice remaster of Space 1999. I don't have those new Blu-rays yet, but they
No,
look
me
great.
neither.
Oh, they do. Okay. I got to get that.
There's been a project for years of different people who all have sort of the same idea and both using the title Space 2099, where they want to make this show, like remake the original episodes with updated effects and better editing and
Right.
remaster them for Blu-ray and basically set them into a time frame that it could still happen rather than it being,
Right.
old news that didn't happen.
Yeah.
One thing Space 1999 did I like, and I love shows that do it. You don't do it as much nowadays. Mission Impossible did it as well. Was at the beginning they showed you scenes from the upcoming episode while the music
yeah.
played, and I used to love that.
I love that.
I love
It's like,
that.
this episode, and you're like, yeah.
And you're
That
was
the
way
new Battlestar
before
Galactica did that
spoilers
too.
became so bad.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, Matt Whitman says Disney sci-fi deep dive, Escape to Witch Mountain. Maybe that ain't no deep dive, man. That was everywhere when I was little.
Yeah.
God, I
That's a good
love
one.
that movie.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a different Disney, but slightly different from this one. Bed Knobs and Broomsticks.
I love that one.
I love that one.
That's a good one
when
too.
when Disney Plus first went live, and I like signed up immediately, that was the first thing that I watched, and I loved it and I hadn't seen it in 45 years, maybe. I loved it just as much.
When they were, I just lost you, Alan. But when they were doing the new Mary Poppins, and I kept teasing Veronica because I really love Bed Knobs and Broomsticks more than Mary Poppins. But I kept asking her if Angela Lansbury is going to be in it, and she kept rolling her eyes at me, and then she was in it.
That's freaking awesome. Tony Bauer says, speaking of Space 1999, how about Jerry Anderson's UFO?
Yes.
Absolutely. Every Jerry Anderson show I love.
Yeah, but I always call it UFO because they always call them UFOs on the show.
Yeah.
Very true.
UFO came on a local station, Channel 11, I mentioned earlier in Texas when I was a kid on, again, Sundays. Sunday was great. And UFO is a very serious show. I mean, there was one episode there was one episode where somehow the group Shadow, which I loved the name, somehow the group Shadow ran afoul of a woman who was trying to kill her husband, and somehow an alien got involved. There was one episode that was it was very, not controversial, but it was different for the year. There was one of the women who did the mission control stuff was in love with one of the pilots. The big deal was she was white and he was black. But what happened was, what was wild was, it was really cool when they fought the aliens. The women, mostly it was women back then, they were doing like traffic control for the pilots. And what happened was, this lady gave course correction for the black pilot she was in love with instead of a pilot she should have given course correction for. And he ended up crashing into an alien ship and getting killed. And then they had to have an inquiry about it. It was strangely mature for the time. It wasn't just it wasn't just an aliens monsters thing. That show had a lot of adult themes in it.
Mm-hmm.
Great show.
Mm-hmm.
I always thought it was really clever that their secret base was under a TV studio, so they could cover all this weird stuff coming in and out.
Yes.
Weird hours of operation.
Yes.
Pretty smart.
Yes. And the little
You could drive a
sub,
spaceship right out of there.
and he had that cool car. Remember, he had the cool car,
Yeah.
the Goldwing car. Yeah.
I remember that they used to sort of pass off because they would use a sound effect to make it sound like the windows were automatic and they would just roll down like this.
Yes.
You could see the shoulder of the person who was doing the crank.
Yes.
Anyway, we're coming up on an hour, believe it or not. So let me get these last comments, and then we'll do a round robin of stuff that we haven't got to talk about yet. Kim Swanson says, since you brought up Lost in Space, the movie, how did y'all feel about the Watchmen TV show? And
I liked it.
I didn't see it. I never did get around to watching it.
It was good.
Excellent. It's excellent.
There you go. Dragon's Domain was scary as hell.
Heck yes.
The Troubled Spirit virtually traumatized me when I was a kid.
Yeah.
That's a good episode if you have scars.
Matt says that Starlog was his Bible for all these shows. 100%, man. God, I still love
mine was the Sci-Fi Channel magazine. I had a subscription, and that I love that magazine.
Yeah, it was great.
TV Guide.
I
had that
too. Randolph Grimm says Voyager. I started it back into my Star Trek. Voyager. Voice at the Bottom of the Sea, Land of the Giants, Time Tunnel, all are on Me TV on Saturday night. That's
great.
some fun watching. Let me tell you.
Yes.
And don't forget a little series that was only on for maybe 1 year or two, but it was actually very influential, called The Invaders.
Yep.
Yeah.
That was one about an architect who one night is driving out and sees a flying saucer and comes to realize that aliens live among us, and basically spends the entire series running around trying to tell people that they're aliens, and they're always trying to chase him and kill him. That was a good show. The aliens had this really weird device that they could disintegrate people. And that was actually really cool back in the day to see them fire this beam and disintegrate people. It's a great series worth watching.
Yeah.
Elaine says, no love for the Enterprise theme song. We're not talking about Trek tonight.
Random.
Totally random. But I'll say, I don't mind that song at all.
Yeah.
I ain't saying I like it. I'm saying I don't mind it.
I don't either.
Kim says, I'm always amazed that I didn't grow up or become a drug user from watching Puppets. Right?
My
Oh,
daughter's
man.
big into Harry Potter, and I always tell her I'm house puffing stuff just to get on her nerves.
I love it.
And by big into Harry Potter, he means that other people like Harry Potter, and she's barely read it or seen it.
Okay. Okay.
Ditto.
Matt says Jerry Anderson was a whole nother rabbit hole, like Harryhausen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Facebook user says, it's been a long road, Elaine. Which she responds, getting from there to here. Kim brings up, oh, sorry. There it is. Kim brings up Aeon Flux.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I remember
cartoon?
that.
I only watched a little bit. I never really got into it.
Was that back in the days when MTV was doing that, and then that other one called the Mac, and some others? Like, do you remember the Mac?
I remember
I don't
Aeon
remember
Flux.
that.
I don't remember the Mac.
I don't remember.
The Mac
It
was
on
that-
MTV.
Yeah, it was that giant purple dude with the big spikes that came out of his wrists.
Okay.
Interesting. I don't know
Yeah.
anything about that.
Yeah, look up the Mac.
Okay.
Nah.
Oh, and
No, I
Alan, one quick comment a minute ago, you mentioned kind of like your earliest memories and stuff like that.
Yeah.
The first thing I remember seeing, I think I remember seeing, was at the movies. I was 4 years old. It's not science fiction, but it's horror, and it got into it. Actually, my dad took me to see Destroy All Monsters.
Okay.
Oh
Oh,
my
if you
God. I
remember
love
that.
that movie so much.
Yes,
Love
but he also, the first movie my dad took me to see when I was 4 years old was Night of the Living Dead.
Wow.
What?
Wow.
Yes. I was 4. One of my
Oh
brothers
my
was
God.
10. And I don't know, Dad didn't know, but I remember watching that movie. And to this day, I remember there's a scene, sorry if I offend people, there's a scene where this young couple is trying to get away and they crash and their truck catches on fire and the zombies go toward them. And you pretty much hear the zombies slurping. It's like, And maybe because I was 4, it didn't bother me. But one of my brothers who was 10 was so traumatized that they ended up having to take him to the doctor, and he got sleeping pills because he was screaming because he kept
my
seeing
goodness.
the zombies. And then there's a whole scene with the little girl with the trowel that goes after her mother. Now I'm 4 years old seeing all this, and it didn't bother me. But to this day, I can't talk about that with my brother because he doesn't want to remember that.
Oh.
Yeah,
Wow.
I started laughing at that story, Keith. You got halfway through it, and then I was like in the middle of a laugh. I'm sorry for
And
your
your
family.
and your mother never let your father take you kids to the movies ever again.
My mom never went to the movie, so she didn't know what Dad was taking us to see.
She saw the result of it.
Yeah, well, that one, yeah. And then I think it was Destroy All Monsters, and another one it's kind of horror, but if you've never seen it, you've got to see this movie called War of the Gargantuans.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
You seen that? Oh,
Oh, yeah.
my gosh, that's so good. That's so good.
Okay,
Creepy.
couple more. Super quick. Facebook user says, what are the most iconic title sequences for you folks?
Twilight.
As
Zone.
in music?
Twilight Zone. Title sequence, so music and visual.
Mission Impossible.
Ooh, that's a good
And Alan, you may remember this. I gotta say, the 3rd season of Lost in Space, because they change their opening theme every year.
one. Yeah.
And the
No, the
third
theme-
season,
The theme
opening
stayed the song for the first 2 seasons,
right?
but the titles changed.
Yeah, I remember the 3rd season
And-
was cool. The 3rd season would have this really exciting prologue, and they'd
Yep.
freeze, and then they would count down.
I love
7,
that.
6.
Yes. Oh, man, I
Awesome
love that.
music. It was
Yes.
great
That would get your heart pumping every
Yes.
week. Oh,
every time.
holy shoot. I love that so much.
And I hate to admit it, but Knight Rider, when I was younger, I did like it.
Knight Rider's good.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know if y'all, Keith won't know this one. Y'all might. And some of the viewers will. The most iconic title sequence ever for being horrible. K9
Okay.
and Company.
Is that a Doctor Who thing?
It's a Doctor
Yes.
Who spinoff, and it's terrible.
They
Yeah.
actually did K9 and Company?
Yep.
Well, one time, and then
Wow.
it didn't get
Yeah.
picked up for series. Anyway, we'll save that for
Wow.
another episode.
Right.
Wow.
Kim says, yeah, it was a comic book series. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I didn't know this.
Michael Phillips says, oh, here's an odd duck, Space Giants. Anyone remember that?
Is that a cartoon one? Is that a cartoon one?
No, I don't know
Okay.
that.
He can't answer us in real time.
That's true. I was waiting.
I can't believe I've never even heard of that, at least. I don't
And-
know that.
Tony Bauer says, the Puppeteers didn't mention pigs in space.
No, you're right. I didn't go into the Jerry Anderson shows either.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. We should.
But we should have.
Yeah.
Jerry Anderson's puppets creeped me out when I was a kid.
Yeah, you know what? My daughter, I would watch her watch Universal Horror,
Mhm.
show a Godzilla movie.
Mhm.
She would watch any old like horror movie I would show her, but she would not watch Thunderbirds. She said
They
Thunderbirds
creep
was
me out.
scary. She will not watch it.
Wow.
I can't watch
And
it to
she
this
lives in a
day.
house where there's tons of puppets. I got puppets everywhere around here.
They creep me out to this day, Charles. There's certain puppets that they creep me out. Yeah, so I don't watch them to this day. I couldn't have one of those in the house, which is weird.
All right. So really quickly, we're at exactly an hour. So what are some of the things that you guys love that we haven't talked about yet? Can you think of anything that's worth a quick mention? Hang on. Hang on. Explanation.
Okay.
Space Giants was live action 1960s Japanese series about a family that can turn into robots and fought aliens that melted into green slime.
Okay.
Well, that sounds amazing, and I want to see it now.
Never heard of this one.
No, I know of Johnny Sacco and his flying robot, but I don't know
Right.
Space Giants. So I'll have to look for that one.
All right. So what are some other things that y'all?
So this is sci-fi adjacent to a point, but Sailor Moon.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. They go in space and stuff, don't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's from the moon.
Counts.
They're from different planets.
Yeah.
Right.
They're the princesses of the various planets.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll say Sliders. Okay, I didn't really get to go into Sliders, but man, I was in love with Sliders.
Yeah.
Up to including season 4 and then the cutoff of season 5.
Yeah.
Didn't it start getting weird when the Cro-Mag came in and all that kind of stuff, and the cast got changed a lot?
That happened, yes, but I still love season 4, even though it went super campy when it went to sci-fi.
Yeah.
But season 5 is where it just went off the rails.
Yes.
Yeah.
But Sliders is so much fun.
Yeah. It still comes on a lot late night. You can catch it all the time.
Oh, Elaine's got a good one. Quantum Leap.
I was obsessed with Quantum Leap. I used to draw Quantum Leap comics, and I in my notebooks at school. And then like 6th grade, I just pretended like I was Sam Beckett, and I leaped into a 6th grader, and I would talk to Al.
That's so awesome.
I was way into Quantum Leap.
I did the same thing with Lost in Space, though. I would draw my own Lost in Space comics.
That's awesome.
Like I had like a big, thick, like 300-page notebook, and I would fill that whole thing with a long story. I drew every page. Obsessed.
I wish I still had those.
Me too.
I did too, Alan. I used to draw pictures of the Jupiter too, and I even drew a schematic of the engines, which I was positive would work because they used ion power.
Yeah.
And I literally, I was 7, and literally, not lying, in the back of the ship, I had a tank of water, and I had a mechanical arm that dropped bars of cesium into it, which can ionize, and I had a big battery attached to it. And the battery was going to push the ions out the back of the ship. And I literally was showing my brothers, like, look, I figured out how the Jupiter 2 could fly.
Wow.
I believe you,
wow.
Yeah.
After talking to you for a year and a half, I believe you.
Yeah, I did. For me, real quick, this is kind of cliche, but I gotta say, the triumvirate that really made me love science fiction were 3 movies, and they're classic movies, which would be The Day the Earth Stood Still, and intelligent sci-fi, and classic sci-fi, The War of the Worlds.
Yeah.
Still my favorite version, the one with a guy by the name of George Powell, who was famous for what we'll call Puppetoons. Fun, different from the book, but phenomenal effects. As far as I'm concerned, still hold up today.
100%.
Great, absolutely.
100%.
And then the one that is most Trek-like is Forbidden Planet. You know, like they say, enough said. I mean, just an amazing show. Introduced Robbie the robot. Still has the special effects are dated, but still holds up. And Star Trek-like themes because it was based on the Shakespeare play, The Tempest.
That's right.
Monsters from the Id.
And I'll throw the Time Machine in there too. So
yes.
George
Oh yes, I love
I love the Time Machine.
The Morlocks.
I'm sorry. As much as there's great stuff that's been coming out ever since Star Wars, great stuff.
Yep.
And I would put Star Wars in the same category as those ones that we just mentioned. There's just nothing like those movies that came out in the 60s, early 70s. Oh my God, there's just something really magical about those that never get old.
You know, I think one of the things going on I've noticed recently, like I said, I know we got to wrap up, is I was talking to somebody recently about a bunch of science fiction movies, and they were talking about, well, this science fiction movie is that good, not that good. And they hated John Carter. That was a flop.
Oh, yeah.
And I said,
such a good movie.
And then today, Cowboys and Aliens was on, and it was deemed a flop. But you know what I think, guys, is I think a lot of times now in this era of big franchises, I think people have forgotten they've lost the ability to enjoy a B movie. A good sci-fi B movie. That's all I had growing up.
Right. Or one standalone movie.
Right.
I think you're right. I absolutely agree with you.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we can go 2 hours talking about all these great science fiction movies and shows.
Well, that's right. Let's do it. Matt jumps in with another one of my absolute favorite movies I've ever seen in my life, Logan's Run.
Yes.
Oh my God. I love that movie. And I did watch the series. I don't remember it very well because I've not rewatched it since then, but I did watch it like on broadcast. That one and the Planet of the Apes series, which I love both of them, but they were very different because like Logan's Run had the android called Rim and the characters were a little different, but you know, it wasn't
hovercraft was super cool.
Right.
Yes. Right. And the movie Logan's Run had Farrah Fawcett in an early role.
Yeah.
Farrah Fawcett.
And Jenny Agutter in one of her first roles.
I remember Jenny Agutter.
More than Farrah Fawcett.
Right.
And one quick fun fact, if you remember the very end of Logan's Run where all the young kids came out and they saw the old man and they were all freaking out about him and he was they were in this awesome structure with all this water. That was filmed 3 miles from my house in Fort Worth. That was the Fort Worth Water Gardens.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Nice.
And people used to go there all the time and it was beautiful. Then they shut down, somebody drowned. But that's where that was filmed.
One person spoils it for everybody.
Yeah.
Keith, all your stories are starting off fun and going dark.
I know, right? It's because my dad took me to see Night of the Living Dead.
Speaking of dad, you see inappropriate stuff. My dad, when I was about 10, and I'm the oldest, like my youngest sister would have been 4 at the time, and my next one would have been like 7. He sat us down and we watched Rocky Horror.
Okay.
Oh, really?
And I remember thinking as I'm watching this, as we got a little further in, I'm like, this is not a movie I should be watching.
Did you throw toast? Did you throw toast at the television?
No, I didn't learn about any of that until much, much later.
All right.
Yeah.
I remember my first time seeing it in the theater, and I was like, I don't understand what the hell is going on. Anyway, 2 more quick mentions. Soylent Green.
Oh, classic.
Omega Man.
Classic, another one.
Yeah.
That's like
Classic.
There's been 3 movie versions of that story, right?
Yeah.
The Omega Man.
Yeah. At least
Vincent Price was in one, which I think was called The Last Man on Earth. Right. Charlton Heston was in the Omega Man, and then Will Smith did I Am Legend.
I Am Legend. Yeah.
Yeah.
But Omega Man is by far my favorite.
Yeah. Same here. Another good one.
All right, we got to wrap it up, or we'll just be here forever.
Absolutely.
Right. Chuck, you take it away.
Okay. Well, I was going to say, now you guys this week did the Earth Station 1 podcast.
Yes.
Right? Did.
Awesome. We should be looking forward to that coming out soon. You guys were talking about Strange New Worlds. So tune into the Earth Station 1 podcast. You can also find Veronica on the most recently released episode of Earth Station Who, where she was talking about the Dominators.
Yep. And
then you guys remember last week when I was like, is it Seeds of Doom or Seeds of Death that I'm going to be talking about on Earth Station Who?
Yeah, you decided it was Doom.
Right, but it's the Leisure Hive. So
completely different.
That was one of I got off the podcast and I was like, what did I say?
Wow.
In my defense, I had to go back and forth with them
that's hilarious.
over the 30 episodes trying to find one to talk about. So I'll be talking about the Leisure Hive coming up soon.
All right.
Earth Station Who.
Well,
and then sorry. And then we've got more of these coming out. We've got some special podcasts with some guests coming up that we're looking forward to. And so watch the feed and keep an eye out. If you enjoy these live shows, join them, share them. It helps us a lot to get people involved, and it's fun. I mean, I really like getting everybody involved and hearing everybody's thoughts. And you guys are throwing out great suggestions and great comments.
Gosh. This time we got comments from Facebook and from our YouTube channel. So at least Tony was watching it live on our YouTube channel. So thank you, Tony, for demonstrating to us that our YouTube feed works.
Right.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you everybody for your comments. These were super, super great.
Right.
This was such a fun episode. Let's do it again next week.
Absolutely. and if you listeners, you have ideas where you'd like us to do a show, or you have a live show topic or a track topic, throw them at us. We'll do everything. We'll even do "And the Children Shall Lead" if you ask for it.
We got no standards.
Yeah.
I'll do an entire episode about Animorphs.
No, we don't.
I will talk. I will seriously do that if anyone wants me to do that.
Okay.
Okay, that's cool. And send us a question of the week.
Yes.
Some quick, short, pithy, relevant or irrelevant, reverent or irreverent question that we can answer at the end of each one of our episodes.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, Alan, where can people find more of you?
Well, in addition to Earth Station Trek, I have a podcast on the ESO network called Modern Musicology, and it is about all sorts of music topics. And we've got a couple of great shows coming up in the next 2 weeks. The first one is It Should Have Been a Single. So songs that were never released as singles but should have been. And the one after that is Killer B-Sides. So when songs did get released as singles and they had like a unique song that never appeared anywhere else as a B-side, and it's a lot of times better than what ended up on the album. Those are the ones we're going to talk about. So good topics coming up.
And how about you, Keith?
Standard social media platforms: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, kind of, sort of.
And how about us, Veronica?
Feltnerdy.com.
And
Monkeying Around, a podcast about the monkeys.
hey, good job, Veronica.
Sorry, Veronica. Veronica, you do it because you were supposed to. I was trying to say it exactly the same time you did.
Yeah,
so you do it again.
I couldn't do that. Monkeying Around, a podcast about the monkeys.
Yay!
I think she still does it better, Alan. Sorry.
I don't know. I mean, well, it's her podcast. She's practiced at it.
That's true. That's true.
I'm just an interloper.
And if you're going to Dragon Con, check out the Felt Nerdy page and give that a like, because we got a lot of announcements coming up. We're doing 4 shows of our own at Dragon Con. And then we're also going to be in the Late Night Puppet Slam. We're also helping with a children's craft hour in the Brit track. We're also, I think we're on a panel. We're busy all weekend. So we're going to have a lot of announcements coming up and some shows coming up. And we actually have booked a show in the Atlanta area that's outside of a convention that we're going to be performing at a children's theater. So we'll have all that stuff coming up soon. So if you are interested in nerdy stuff or puppets, like the Felt Nerdy Facebook page. And then Veronica, do you have a closing for us this week?
Space, the final frontier.
Hey, okay. It's on the episode that we didn't talk about Star Trek, but that's fine.
You have to get the Trek angle in there somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for watching and commenting. We super appreciate it. We had such a great time, and I hope you all did too. And you must have, because there's quite a few people that stuck around for the entire hour and 12 minutes.
Thank you.
So
thank
you
everybody
so much for spending your evening with us, and we'll do it again next week. We got all these more coming up, so keep watching for further announcements. Everybody take care. Have a great night, and we will see you soon.
Bye.
And